Good morning. Now, in continuation with Chapter 13, Organisms and Populations, previously we have discussed about competition. We have talked about causes, competition exclusion principle, resource partitioning, coexistence. So, when competition between same species occurs, that is intraspecific, and between different species, that is interspecific. So, this topic we completed last time. Today, we are starting with parasitism. Now, considering that the parasitic mode of life ensures free lodging and meals, it is not surprising that parasitism has evolved in so many taxonomic groups from plants to higher vertebrates. Many parasites have evolved uh, host specific. They can parasitize only a single species of host in such a way that both host and the parasite tend to co evolve. That is, if the host evolves special mechanism for rejecting or resisting the parasite has to evolve mechanisms to counteract and neutralize them in order to be successful with the same host species. In accordance with their lifestyle, parasites evolved special adaptations such as loss of unnecessary sense organs, presence of adhesive organs or suckers to climb onto the host, loss of digestive system, and high reproductive capacity. Now, the life cycle of the life cycle of the parasite. They are more complex, evolving one or two intermediate hosts or vectors to facilitate parasitism and to its primary host. Now, in accordance with their lifestyle, parasites evolved special adaptations such as loss of unnecessary sense organs. Like we have discussed all these points during the course of evolution, they do certain points and they do evolve according to the various vectors also. So, the human liver fluke, when we talk about a nematode parasite, it depends on two intermediate hosts, a small and a big fish, and to complete its life cycle. And the malarial parasite, it also needs a vector mosquito to spread to the other host. So majority of the parasites, they harm the host. They may reduce the survival, growth and reproduction of the host and reduce its population density. They might render the host most vulnerable to predation by making it physically weak. So parasites that feed on the external surface of the host organisms, they are ectoparasites, like you can see here in the pictures. These are ectoparasites. Now, here the most familiar example is the lice on humans and ticks on dogs, and many marine fishes, they are infested with ectoparasite scopopods. Cuscuta, a plant parasite. It is commonly found growing on hedge plants. It has lost its chlorophyll and leaves in the course of evolution. It derives its nutrition from the host plant, which it parasitizes. The female mosquito is also considered as a parasite, or is not considered as a parasite, although it needs our blood for reproduction. So, in contrast, endoparasites, they are those that live inside the host, like in liver, kidneys, lungs, blood cells, and the life cycle of the endoparasites are more complex because of their extreme specializations. Their morphological and anatomical features, they are greatly simplified while emphasizing their reproductive potential also. In brood parasitism in birds, it's an example of parasitism in which the parasitic birds lays its eggs in the nest of the host and let the host incubate them. During the course of evolution, the eggs of the parasite bird have evolved to resemble the host eggs in the size and color to reduce the chances of the host bird detecting the foreign eggs and ejecting them from the nest. So here this is the example of brood parasitism, which is in quail or cuckoo and the crow eggs. Commensalism is the interaction in which one species benefits and the other is neither harmed nor benefited. An orchid growing as an epiphyte on a mango branch, and barnacles growing on the back of the whale beneath, while neither the mango tree nor the whale derives its benefit. So the cattle egret and the grazing cattle in close association, it's a sign which we have seen often. It's a classical example of parasitism. The egret always forage close to where the cattle are grazing, because the cattle, as they move, stir up and flush out from the vegetation insects that otherwise might be difficult for the egrets to find and catch. Another example of commensalism is the interaction between the sea anemone that has stinging tentacles and the clownfish that lives among them. So the fish get protection from the predators while stay away from the stinging tentacles, and the anemone does not appear to derive any benefit by hosting on the clownship. Now, mutualism. The interaction in which the benefit on both the interacting species is there. Lichens represent an example where the fungus and the algae or cyanobacteria, they live in close association. Mycorrhiza, where we find the association between fungi and the roots of higher plants. The fungi help the plants in absorption of essential nutrients from the soil, and the plants in turn provides the fungi with the energy yielding carbohydrates. The most spectacular and evolutionary fascinating example of mutualism are found in plant-animal relationships. Now, plants, they need the help of the animals for pollination of their flowers and dispersing their seeds. Animals obviously have to be paid the fees for the services that the plants expect from them. So plants often rewards or fees in the form of pollen and nectar for pollination. And here we can have a look at this picture. Here we can see how the pollinators and juicy and nutritious fruits for the seed dispersal. But the mutually benefited system should also be safeguarded against cheaters. For example, animals that try to steal nectar. Now, who are the cheaters? These are the animals who try to steal the nectars and without pollinating. Now you can see why plant-animal interactions, they evolve co-evolution of the mutualism, that is the evolution of the flower and its pollinator species. They co-evolve, that is they are linked with one another. In many species of fig trees, there is a tight one-to-one relationship with the pollinator species of wasp, like we can see here. It means that the fig species, they can be pollinated only by its partner wasp species and no other species. The female wasp uses the fruit not only as an oviposition or egg-laying site, but also developing seeds within the fruits for nourishing its larvae. The wasp pollinates the fig inflorescence while searching for suitable egg-laying sites, and in return for the favor of the pollination, the fig offers the wasp some of the developing seeds as food for developing wasp larvae. So this is the mutual relationship between fig tree and wasp. The fig flower is pollinated by wasp, and the wasp is laying eggs in the big fruit. So fig fruit. Here we see the next orchids showing a diversity of floral patterns, many of which have evolved to attract the right pollinator insects, that is bees and bumblebees, which ensure guaranteed pollination by it. Not all orchids offer rewards. The Mediterranean orchid of rice employs sexual deceit to get pollination done by a species of bee. One petal of flower bears an uncanny resemblance to the female of the bees in size, color and markings. So the male bee is attracted to that and it perceives as a female. So it pseudo-copulates with the flower, and during that process it dusts the pollens from the flower. And when this same bee pseudo-copulates with another flower, it transfers pollens to it and thus pollinates the flower. So here you can see how co-evolution operates. And if the female bee's color pattern changes even slightly for any reason during evolution, pollination success will be reduced unless the orchid flower also co-evolves to maintain the resemblance of its petals to the female bee. So this is how mutualism exists in living organisms. So with this we complete chapter 13. Thank you.